All right, let's get going, guys. So, welcome to Wapiti Live Q&A for October 11th, 2023. So, I was really kind of going back and forth on tonight's topic, and I just really nothing was popping into my head, and then I just thought about it, and I said, I said, within every outing outdoors that we go, there's always lessons to be learned if we are willing to be open to receive those lessons and pay attention to them. And so I was kind of doing some reflecting, and I said, I said, we're going to talk about lessons learned tonight, and kind of what I want for tonight is kind of a roundtable discussion to, all kind of start and talk about some of the lessons I learned, and then, we'll just let these late stragglers in. So, um, but yeah, so I'll start and kind of talk about some of the lessons that I learned this year, and then what I thought we'd do is just kind of let you guys jump in and talk about some lessons that you learned, because I think it's important that we pay attention to those lessons, because it helps us grow. It helps us grow as hunters. It helps us grow as outdoorsmen. It helps us grow in all aspects, and not just in the outdoors, but also in our regular life too. Um, so a couple of the lessons that I took away from this season, one of them was adaptability. And I've talked in the past about having plan A, B, C, D, E on down the line. Um, but with us going into a brand new unit this year and not scouting or anything, we started the season 25, 26 miles back in, pretty much at the end of the road. Motorcycle trails, beautiful country. And I got to thinking about that, and a lot of people, and I mean, we spent what, 3, 4 days hunting back there, hitting all kinds of different areas. We never hit the same place twice, because our main thing is, we're in a new area. We gotta go find elk. We gotta cover ground. We gotta take inventory. We'll keep tabs of what we've seen, for possible areas that we may want to go back to. And after those 3, 4 days, it's like, we need to move. We need to move. We need to go to a different area to where we have a lot more options from camp. We can drive an hour in different directions, and check different things out and cover a lot more country. And again, we were there for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 5.5 days before we moved again. And it just reminded me that lesson of being mobile, adapting and adjusting your plan. Because a lot of people, especially those coming from back east, they get into one area and they will spend their whole time in that one area. They may not be seeing the sign, they may not be getting bugles, there may be other people there, but they stay in that area. And that's one of the lessons that I pulled away from was, basically don't fall in love with an area. Because I mean, we got into, I mean, that Elk Creek that we rode into, good Lord,
Urban shit.
you
Oh,
want
no.
to talk about, if you could pick up a paintbrush and paint what your ideal elk country would be, man, this was it. It was a basin up at a creek head with timber, open meadows, benches. I mean, just away from roads. I mean, you know, we were 7.5 miles in on the motorcycle trail to get to this. And the only other access from the other side was about 12, 13 miles up in there. So, I mean, you want to talk about an area where elk probably aren't harassed or pressured.
Turn it down, dude.
Should have been that. But yeah, it's unfortunately we just didn't see anything in there. Didn't see any sign, didn't see any tracks, didn't see any rubs, didn't see any elk signs. So the other thing, that the lesson that I pulled away from, and I realized this the last day we were out, because we constantly kept picking this up and looking at on X. And I looked at Bryce and I was like, when did we stop reading a mountain? When did when did we stop looking up on a hill and go, I think there's elk there, I think there's elk there, and working that mountain face, working those drainages based on woodsmanship skills and understanding thermals and terrain and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, we have become so reliant on this with Onyx and Basemap and all the other apps that you can get out there. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're great tools, but I think we have become far too reliant on him that some of our skills have kind of diminished a little bit. And I don't know if that's necessarily hurting us out there, but man, I was sitting there, we were tucked under a tree and it was raining, and I was just thinking about what it was like, before Onyx, even before GPS, even before I had a GPS. Heck, I just covered ground, got elevation, scanned the landscape, figured, oh, elk are going to be there or there. Okay, there's my path. Pick your benchmarks. Maybe it's an old burnt tree, or it's a rock face, or an outcropping, or something, to pick my path to get there. And using the sun as a navigational, I mean, we know it rises in the east, it sets in the west. So if it's rising on your right shoulder, you're facing north. If it's setting on your right shoulder, you're facing south. So using some of those things to kind of navigate around and work the mountain. And I think what got me thinking is, we sit there and we look at On X, and it's like, I want to go over there. I want to go to that point. Well, everything between where you're at and where you want to go, you just breeze right through. You've got a destination in mind. I'm heading to that spot, and instead of really going slow and scanning for the sign around you, you're constantly looking down on the phone. Am I on path? How much farther is it? How far have I gone? Am I heading the right direction? Is there an easier route? So, so those are a couple of lessons that I pulled away from this season with. So, Greg, how about you? What did you guys walk off the mountain with?
Wanting to know more about mushrooms. There are so many mushrooms, shapes, colors, sizes.
Yeah, we noticed that too. There was a lot of mushrooms popping, and that's one of the things that I saw in one of those Idaho Facebook groups, was there was people asking, "Hey, what the heck is this mushroom that is popping up all over?" And somebody basically said what it was. They actually said it's really, really good eating, and they said it only pops up like once every 5 years or something.
This is the first year I've seen the chanterelles out. I don't know if they come out. I'm not a big mushroom. I'd love to, but I don't know how to identify the right mushrooms and stuff. But
Yeah.
elk wise, what I came off with is listening to what you were saying about all the vegetation, how it affects the gathering of the elk, why they weren't calling so much, and that was a lesson learned before I got to the field that worked out in the field.
It's always good when we can get lessons learned, and we actually pay attention to them before we get out there, versus when we get out there and make the mistake, and then it's like, oh yeah, we've talked about that. So
Yeah, I'm gonna text Michael.
yeah, kind of like you did right before you left.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was intentional.
I know. I was laughing about it. No, there's times during the season that Bryce and I will sit there and we'll do something and we'll just look at each other and it's like, you're a moron. You know better than that. Why did you do that? So, but I think that's all fun, part of the fun. And I'm extremely blessed with the hunting partners, Bryce and Brandon, that I do have, and the camaraderie and the ability to have those joking opportunities. So, Mr. Larry, how about you? Any lessons from the field that you want to share?
Well, maybe a couple. As I mentioned last time, I got to actually go on two elk hunts with two different friends that had tags. The first one we were successful, and it wasn't because of skill. It wasn't because of the ability to release an arrow properly. It was simply because we decided to sit down and wait and listen and see what happens. And we waited and we listened, and God sent us a cow down the trail. Okay? So just being out in the way of the animals is sometimes the most successful thing you can do. And the second takeaway is that something that you mentioned last week, when you're doing a scenario, don't give it less than an hour. Be patient. Be patient. And I have a tendency to give it 30 minutes, maybe 40, and then walk away, and then the animal follows me. And that happened with a cow and a calf after we'd walked away from a scenario. The second takeaway is failure points on a very successful scenario setup. We called a nice bull to our buddy. He couldn't pull his bow back. So he was shooting too much poundage. And I asked him later, I said, well, let me see you draw. And he skied it. And I said, no, just point it at the animal. He said, I can't do that. I've got to point it at the sky in order to do it. So the lesson is don't shoot more poundage than you're capable of delivering at the moment that you plan for all year long.
Great lesson. Don't don't let that male pride jump in
Yeah.
there and tell us we need to shoot an 80-pound bow or anything like that. So, yeah, the cold calling scenarios. I mean, unfortunately, that's a hard lesson that I learned from numerous setups where it just became too impatient. Just, yeah, the doubt starts creeping in your mind, and this isn't going to work, and what am I doing? There's a bull bugling on the other side of the ridge, and I just need to get moving. And yeah, I don't know how many times got up and started moving and didn't even walk 20, 30 yards, and then there I am locking eyes with a bull that was, coming in, and it's like, dang it. And I would tell myself, you idiot, you need to sit there longer. You need to sit there longer. And then I'll go a mile and a half, 2 miles, set up in another calling scenario, and 30 minutes later, and it's just like that Sunday, the 24th. I went out there on the hunt, and I was sitting there doing some light cold calling, and I knew they were out on the private property and they had worked their way my direction. But I had been sitting there hour and a half, from before light into light, nothing. And, finally I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going back to camp. I'm going to tear down camp and head home. And I picked up my bow and took 2 steps, and it's like there's a growler. And so yeah, that patience is a very, very hard lesson to learn. And I think that's where, and I mean, I even went into that Sunday morning saying, I'm going to give it until 9 o'clock. If I don't have anything, if I haven't heard anything by 9 o'clock, I'm going to you know, head back and head down off the mountain. But I mean, it was 8:12 when I picked up my bow. I didn't even make it to my goal of saying, okay, you're going to stay here until 9. So no, when you sit down and do a cold calling and you're like, I'm going to sit here for an hour, I mean, 30 minutes can feel like an eternity. And I mean, man, you're just like, oh, it's just like after the shot. I mean, I joke with my partner sometimes, and I'm like, holy crap, you guys are going to have to get a rope or a ratchet strap and tie me to the tree, because I ain't going to be able to sit here for at least 45 minutes until I start tracking. Because I'll sit down and I'll be like, okay, stay right here. I'm just going to sneak up to where that elk was standing. Okay, I'm gonna look for my arrow. Okay, I'm just gonna take a few steps and see if I can find, blood within the first few steps. And next thing I know, my pack's on, my bow's in my hand, and I'm going down the trail. So All right, Mr. J, your turn. Any lessons learned this year you want to share?
Uh, I learned there's a lot more people out in the woods this year. A lot more.
Yeah, yeah.
It's yeah. Uh, I called in altogether this season. I called in 6 hunters,
Okay.
and
Good job.
uh,
You sounded really good.
I guess to them I did.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I took your advice and I started calling softer,
Hmm.
and we started getting into them a little bit more. No shots, but you know where I was at in the first thing in the mornings, they would talk, not a lot, just here and there. And as soon as we would set up and I'd start calling, they'd shut up.
Yeah.
And then it would go about an hour to 2 hours, and then they'd, start talking again. It was a weird year.
Do you think that they would shut up because your volume was too loud, or was that towards the tail end when you were kind of getting softer?
It was towards the tail end
Okay.
when I was getting soft,
Yeah.
and they still, yeah, it was a hard year.
Yeah. Now remember too, sometimes, and I've had this happen on a lot of occasions where hearing them going off on their own and I set up and start doing a sequence and they shut up. Sometimes they shut up because they're kind of curious of what's going on over in your world. And that's where that curiosity to where they can go silent and then slip in. That's
Yeah,
not always the case. I've had it numerous where yeah, they've shut up, and of course I've been sitting there, still doing the routine, but of course, that wisdom in the back of the mind is like, oh man, did another hunter come in and spook him? Did a predator? You're
yeah,
checking the wind. Did they wind me? Did this? You start going down all the scenarios of why they would have gone silent and why they're moving away. But sometimes it could be that they're just sneaking in to see what's going on, or they could just be looping downwind to catch your
yeah,
wind. Especially if it's an older age class bull. I've seen older age class bulls do that a lot. That they'll just shut up. And they'll circle around so far out that you won't even see them or really hear a twig snap or anything, but they're looping back around to catch your wind to really see, especially if you're doing a breeding sequence and you're portraying a hot cow. Oh
yeah,
yeah, they'll want to get downwind and scent check that. That's why, in fact, we uh, one of the evenings when we got on the ridge and I was doing a breeding sequence and we started rolling off the ridge at dark, and I was like, God dang it, I forgot to buy some elk fire, which is a cow and heat urine with a spray. Because what I've done a lot in the evenings when I've done a breeding sequence and I've had bulls at distance really engage, but maybe it just got dark before they got to me, I will coat wherever I'm at in that cow and heat urine, and then I'll come back in the next morning. And what it can do a lot of times is before they head out to bed, they may sneak in the cover of darkness and kind of scent check that area. And the fact that you've doused a lot of that elk fire on that ridge, and then the next morning you come back in, works really well. In fact, those deodorant sticks that I've talked about, with the elk attractants. Um, Mark makes one that's called a bull blend, which, remember when a bull rubs, he opens up that occipital gland and he will put his scent on those trees. And man, there was an old road that this bull was rubbing, and I was doing a breeding sequence one night and he stayed up on the knob just screaming. And so on the way out was I took that bull blend and I rubbed that bull blend on every single tree I walked by that he had been rubbing on. And then I came back in there the next morning and he came down on that road that night to check what was going on. And he noticed this other bull rub and he thrashed some of those trees. In fact, one of them, he completely got so mad, he just snapped right off. So,
oh
so
wow,
there's another little tip right there is if you're ever doing a breeding sequence in the evening and you have bulls at a distance that are engaged and bugling back at you quite a bit, man, sprinkle some elk urine. Just make sure, Jay and Greg, here in Idaho, we can only use synthetic now.
synthetic, yeah,
Yep. So,
Yep.
so there
I,
are a
I,
couple of there are a couple of brands out there that do make a pretty good synthetic blend.
yeah,
I know one of the archery shops over here. Um, they had some bottles, and in fact, we he had them in June, and I was like, yeah, we need to pick some of these up. And I mean, you know how fast June to August goes. I mean, just blink of an eye, and
yeah.
season's here. So, I
I got a question.
yep.
One of the mornings we were going in and there was a bull talking, and he sounded close. My guess he was probably about 200 yards.
Okay.
And my one buddy that I was hunting with said, "Let's hurry and get in there and set up and call." And I was like, "No, I want to go get a little bit closer, and I want to go. You know, the way the wind was, he would have busted us." So we went, you know, round way. Probably I shouldn't probably went that far around him to get downwind, and got in there and set up. I had my buddy and then another buddy with him and his wife. So I set those three up and I got back to start calling. My very first cow call, I caught movement 100 yards away. It was that bull. And he caught us doing everything, setting up everything. And he didn't take off, you know, like he was spooked. He just walked away.
Yeah.
And so what I was wondering, do you have all the years you've been hunting elk? What would you say? Do you get more into more bulls in the morning or evenings? And
Ooh.
you take your bulls that you take, are they mornings or evenings?
You know, it's been kind of about an even split.
Oh
Um,
wow.
the thing about the morning is morning, you know, especially if you get to the destination where they're heading to, you have a lot more time to
Yeah.
set up and work them. You're not as rushed. Evening hunts to me are always fast and furious. Evening hunts a lot of times are really that last 30 to 45 minutes of daylight, and usually on that, you know, as soon as I hear a response, man, it's covering ground and closing that distance as much as I can, just because I want to have as much light working, you know, working that bull. um but yeah, it's well, no, let me read. I would say actually more the scale probably tips more towards morning
Yeah.
than evening. Um, just because evening time it is so short and fast and furious, and there are times that if I feel that I can't get close enough to him or he's too far out, I'm not even going to work. There's been times in the evenings where I've just shut up and let him do his natural thing and notate that for the morning and then go back in the next morning after him, because then I know exactly where he's going to be and where he's going to come and stuff. So, but no, there have been quite a few that ended up with pack off the mountain that get back to camp at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes later.
Yeah. Well, especially where I hunt, a lot of the people that, well, not a lot of people, most of my hunting partners don't really want to. I mean, we go out in the evenings, but nobody ever really takes a shot.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I mean, the evening hunt, you know, it has its own different set of challenges.
Yeah.
So, I mean, blood tracking at night in the dark, especially if it's not a very good blood trail. You know, there's a lot of factors that you got to consider there. If it's getting down into the 40s at night, I'll let an elk lay. So, because that's the key, it has to be down into the 40s, because that 40-degree temp really drives the cold into the meat and cools it down. If it's not going to be in the 40s, I'll stay on that blood trail at night and just track it as much as I can. but yeah, if it's going to be cold enough and it's kind of a questionable blood trail, I'll back out and come back in the morning, which I've done. So we did that with one of Bryce's bulls about 5, 6 years ago. So, and of course the whole way down off the mountain, he's like, I don't know. I think we need to stay on the blood trail. And I'm like, dude, there's so many elk tracks in here. We can't follow tracks. It's dark. We've lost the blood trail. We don't know which direction he went. And he's like, I don't know. I'm worried about meat spoilage. And I'm like, dude, it's going to be 38 freaking degrees tonight. It will be fine. And yeah, when we found him the next morning, we were only within 100 yards of him too. That's the crazy thing. So where we backed off, but yeah, I mean, as soon as you started peeling the hide, that meat was cold, 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 really cold. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely, morning times. And honestly, I mean, the nice thing about morning time is like I said, you have a lot more time to work them, but then also too, you can follow them to bed and then you're there for midday madness, which that midday time, I absolutely love. So,
And I think that's another thing I would say I took away from this year. I messed up this year because we got in on some elk. I don't even know. It had to have been a herd. There was quite a few. But we was just on the tail end of them, and we'd get close and close and close, and then they'd move and move, and the bull was answering, but he wouldn't commit and come in. Uh, it was probably noon. It was probably noon, or it was like, yeah, it was noon. We sat down, had lunch, got back up, started easing up slow, and my son Austin caught movement, so we, all of us stopped, and the whole herd was coming. They were still on their feet,
yeah.
and he took a shot and missed.
Aha.
But
Yeah.
he was those cows, I bet were 20-25 yards from him.
So I'll have to give Austin a bad time, let him know that
Yeah,
he's, I see he's deadly on grouse, but struggles on elk.
yeah,
Makes perfect
yeah,
sense. I mean, the size comparison. So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So, is he there?
Yeah, I I had to. I don't know if you've ever watched a 24-year-old try to cook, but he burnt his own grilled cheese sandwiches.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just tell him, get him a knife and he can scrape that charcoal off and he'll still be okay. So,
Unless it was on the inside.
what's that?
Unless it was on the inside too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, if you burnt
Yeah.
that farm and stuff. All right, Mr. Sandy, how about you?
Well, I didn't have a lot of luck with elk the last day and a half of season. Um, but I definitely learned go where the elk are. 'Cause I spent a lot of time covering ground, working my ass off, and just really never found much of anything. I went to a unit where there's a lot of elk, but it's spike only,
Yeah.
and I was an elk. Just I couldn't have thrown a stick without finding an elk. Problem is that I couldn't find any spikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But next year I'll be up there opening day, and I'll hunt that area till I'm blue in the face because I know there's spikes in there. I just got to find them, and
Yeah.
you know, and at the very least, I'll get to see elk. I'll get to interact with them. I'll get to practice my calling with them. And there's a lot to be said about interacting with elk and learning that way. Not to discount your calling videos, but actually being able to interact with them and read them out and learn where they're bedding down and physically be in their space versus going where I can shoot any elk, but I just can't find the damn things.
The advantage of going into an area like that, you're exactly right. You get to learn their behaviors. You get to learn, the type of habitat that they look for, their travel corridors, their bedding areas, their feeding areas, and then you can take that information that you learn from that into, other areas to where you can shoot any elk, and then you take that information and apply it to those areas. Then all of a sudden, you're, holy crap. There's a lot of elk in this area. I've hunted this thing for 5 years and didn't realize this was this many elk. But yeah, you really learn a lot, and it's really cool with those interactions, like you said, the ability to um, play with your calling and play with different sounds and mix things up a little bit to see how they respond, to it. And that's the fun part there. And that's the best teacher you can have, is those interactions. That's for sure.
Andy, what are you working on there?
He's cutting up
Uh,
apples.
I'm cutting up apples. I found a place that let me glean, but a lot of them are wormy, and I'm going to be pressing cider out of them.
Huh.
Okay,
And if
cool.
it was just worms, I wouldn't mind, but some of them got mold at the core because it rained a bunch of them split.
Uh,
So I'm, I don't like drinking mold, so I'm chopping them up, and then I'm gonna run my cider press and make dozen gallons of cider or better.
Cool.
those.
I got the back of my 8-foot truck a third of the way full of apples, so I got a ways to go.
Well, those worms. That's just extra protein in the cider.
It is. And I don't mind the worms. I mind the mold.
Yeah, yeah. Can understand that one. So, um, here's another lesson that I learned too, is and this was from sitting on another ridge, hiking up that last day, listening to my buddy on the other ridge. Sometimes we get so focused on calling that, sometimes less is more. Here I am over on the ridge doing nice, clean, controlled 2-note location bugles, and he's over there with a Primos Terminator mouthpiece, and he didn't do anything fancy. He just let out some little bugles, and in fact, I got that comment from Bryce again, because I'm calling and not getting responses, and he toots on that Primos just nice and simple, and he got 2 bulls responded, and Bryce basically told me I sucked, and he was going to hike to the other side of the drainage and go hunt with Jake over there. And so I was gracious enough to point out the path that he could take that would get him there in the shortest time frame. So, but
What was it, over a 30-foot precipice?
no, it was down through the most gnarliest, thickest buckbrush, but it was a straight line. He had to drop down through the buckbrush and cross 2 different creeks and up the other side. And he didn't like the path that I chose for him. And I said, well, you can either choose that path or you can choose the one that takes you to hell. I don't care. Choose one and go. So, so
Either way, go there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, it just, I was sitting there and I was like, sometimes less is more. That, we're trying to do what we can to get a bull to respond, and we're doing all these things. And sometimes just a nice, simple, ugly sounding bugle is what it takes to get a response. But we focus so much on being the perfectionist of, my sounds have to sound clean and they have to be perfect, and this and that. And it just reminded me that we don't always have to be perfect. And I've thought, I thought back on several bulls that I've hunted, during the years, that, I mean, there was one that I would have bet $1,000 was a Primos Terminator, because it had that, and that was his bugle, and I would have bet $1,000 that it was a Primos Terminator. There was another time that we heard a bugle and we started laughing, and we're like, that dude sucks. He is not very good at all. And listened to him for probably 30 minutes. And I mean, there towards the tail end, it was like, yeah, he's getting better, but he still kind of sucks. And I said, well, he's coming our direction, so let's just wait right here. And when he comes out, we'll kind of talk to him and see where he's going to go. Because, we don't want him bugling anywhere near us, because he just sounds horrible. And next thing we know, here comes a bull strut, cruising down the trail. And it's like, I was like, well, I wonder if that bull slipped past that dude, or if that dude was trying to get that bull and then he bugled, and we both looked at each other, was like, that's not a person. So So yeah, you just we don't always have to be perfect. So I know I've
I
said,
had that this year, Michael. The bull I was playing with for the last hour and a half a season.
uh-huh.
When he started off, I could have swore it was another hunter because he started off like you talked about with your locator uh, setup. Just a couple of little chirps, and then it was just real light one note locate, and it was locating a couple of chuckles. And then there was a pretty good bugle, and then pretty soon he was lip balling. And I go, it's got to be a hunter. There's a guy right over there. He's 400 yards from me. And then all of a sudden, that bugle moved 300 yards in 30, 40 seconds
Yeah.
and without a sound. That ain't no hunter. And so that's why I started calling. I played with that bull. I was a spike only unit, so I was just having fun
Yeah.
last night of season. I played with him for an hour and a half, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. We were just in a scream fest. Uh,
You're sitting there thinking there's an elk calling academy member over there doing the locate sequence.
I'd have laid money on it, and I'd have lost. I'm going. Somebody watch Michael's locate call videos.
Yeah. No, it's kind of funny. It's one of those things that, especially from a distance, it's really hard to tell a lot of times between, a decent caller and an elk because, at the distance, you're really only getting that top note. But once you kind of start getting closer and you start hearing the bottom register, then it's pretty easy to tell, the difference, usually. So, but yeah, so. Well, good lessons. Definitely, I think, appreciate all you guys sharing your stuff. I think that, the guys that are watching the replay and stuff will have the ability to, hopefully listen to the lessons learned and kind of think about, their adventures and experiences out there and think about their lessons a little bit. And I, I really believe that, us tapping into that, it just makes us better, from season to season. I don't really journal as much as I used to, especially early on where I journaled everything. But if there's something kind of unique that happens, I will journal about it just to have a reference to go back to. But definitely learning and growing is what it's all about.
We had lots of bears this year.
Lots of bears. I didn't see a single one this year. Didn't really get into much bear sign either in all the places we were at.
I saw 16 bears on the first hunt and 8 bears on the second.
Yeah, I remember you saying that quite a
Yeah,
few
my
bears.
buddy went back the next weekend to hunt bears.
Did
He
he?
saw he saw 0 bears.
See, that's the way it goes.
He should have gone elk
It's
hunting.
it's just like you have a cow tag in your pocket, all you see is bulls, and then when you have the bull tag on the rifle hunt, all you see is cows.
Yeah.
So at least that's usually how it goes on my rifle hunts. Hopefully this weekend with Liz, that will be a little different. So
Well,
Hard
good
to
luck.
tell with the increased number of hunters in the field and the reports of bear encounters. Is the number of bear really changing, or is just the awareness and the encounters changing?
I think it's with the increased number of people that are out there, you're having more bear encounters because there's a lot more people out there now. So,
Right.
but
I agree.
I don't know. I saw where Colorado finally struck a deal for their wolf reintroduction. So,
So what's the deal? How did it fall down?
because Colorado has been pushing for wolf reintroduction for quite a while, and they actually struck a deal with Oregon to where Oregon is going to trap 10 wolves and transport those 10 wolves and give them over to Colorado.
Oh man.
Oh,
We
it's
don't
got
need
people.
any-
It's got people in Oregon. Oh, it's got people in Oregon up in arms because they're like, if we have enough wolves to give to another state, we have enough wolves to hunt.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Which I agree. And what's funny is a lot of the wolves over in Oregon, especially in Eastern Oregon, are wolves that actually are from Idaho, but basically they decimated the game in their areas and they went branching out looking for game. And that's how they ended up in Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon, and then just
Thanks for sharing.
gravitating. So, hey, not a problem. Not a problem. Trust me, we still have plenty. If y'all want more, just let us know. We'll send a few more your direction.
Don't need no more wolves.
No, no. We actually one of the places that we hunted, we actually did get into a pack that was howling. So, and we were contemplating whether to turn it from a elk hunt to a wolf hunt, but we had already gone up pretty good steep face and rolled around over to one great big bench, and they were quite a ways down on a knife ridge, and I'm like, that's a lot of elevation to drop, and I don't know. I'd rather go back to camp. That's the day we decided to move. I said I'd rather go back to camp and hook up on the trailer and get the heck out of this area and go hit a different spot. But so they're fun to listen to at a long distance.
Yeah.
They had 2 grizzlies taken down in where I'm at this year.
Yeah, Greg hunts over in that same area, Jay.
Yeah.
So
There's a book, Wolfer.
yep.
Carter Niemeyer. Very, very good book about wolf introduction. I enjoyed the book. Educated me quite a bit.
Yeah. Give you some good tips on where to find them, how to get them, and all that good stuff.
No, it's just the history and
How
everything that led up.
how everything came about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good story.
Good deal. So, all right, guys. Well, that's all I got for you tonight. So, and as you can tell, I'm standing up tonight, so you can tell this was going to be a serious discussion since I'm standing up instead of sitting in a nice, comfy chair. So,
Hey,
Thanks, Michael. Good luck on your hunt this weekend. Hope you get a nice one.
thank you. Yeah, pressure's on. Got to produce for the wife there. So,
There you go.
but I have heard that I got a text message from a buddy yesterday that was up around Lewiston, and he sent me a picture of the bull that he shot. And then while he's standing there by that bull, he sends me a picture of another bull that came in while he was, taking care of his. And I'm like, well, I said, are they bugling? And he goes, we enjoyed 3.5 straight hours of solid bugling this morning.
Oh my, awesome.
So hopefully, hopefully we can get into some, and we'll sure give it a good try.
Look forward to your report.
So, okay, we are back on the regular schedule, which means the next Wapiti Live Q&A will be in 2 weeks on the 25th. And hopefully have some good reports to give you guys from that hunt. If you guys do have any topics that you want to discuss, just shoot me an email, let me know, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And as always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, though, have fun.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in tonight, guys. Appreciate it.
luck.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, guys.